So the former president will be heading into court today for an arraignment in Manhattan, and you're an attorney and spent some time there, like you talked about, working as a senior staffer. Did you ever see anything close to this when you were there? Obviously not a former president, this is the first time, but anything this reminds you of? This looks pretty wild.
It does. I mean, to people who are just tuning in now, this is very shocking to people. But the fact is that this case and this type of case is the bread and butter of the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. At its core, what we largely expect to be the charges here, falsifying a business record, is something that is brought in these state courts every day of the week. It's a charge that's very common at the Manhattan DA's office. It's one that I've charged countless times. It's one that is very common, and it's something that those who are in the court system in New York are very familiar with. And so there's nothing usual about this case in terms of the profile of the defendant or the crush of pretrial publicity. But when you start looking at these charges themselves, there's really nothing that unusual about them. What is unusual about what we expect to be the charge is that falsifying a business record is a misdemeanor. It couldn't get charged because the statute of limitations ran out. And so what we expect to be the case is that it's being, quote unquote, bumped up to the next level to be a felony. And that requires that the falsification of business records be done with the intent to commit or conceal a different crime. We don't know what that is. People are speculating maybe it's a federal election fraud, maybe it's a tax fraud. We don't precisely know, but what it's being used for is to bump up a very bread and butter kind of charge, falsifying business records, to a felony.
And just in general, we got a little bit there, but I'm just curious what you make of the cases. We're waiting for these indictment documents to be released to get more information. What do you expect to see on that? Anything that might surprise you? Anything you're thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we don't know about the case so far is in what way it's going to be bumped up to a felony. In what way is the prosecutor going to say, yes, there's a falsification here of the business record, but not only is that, it was falsified for the intent of committing some other crime. We don't know what that is yet. And I think that's what everyone's waiting to see. Otherwise, I think what we're expecting largely to see is more than 30 counts of false entries in the books and records of the organization. And these laws exist because New York State requires businesses to keep a true accounting of what's going on in their books, in their companies, in their books and records. And so this is a longstanding New York State law. It's one that is prosecuted all the time. And so we just don't precisely know how it's going to turn into a felony yet. But otherwise, I think we're just going to be seeing 30 counts, 30 different false entries in the books and records. It'll probably be a pretty straightforward case.
And what do you think the chances are something like this goes to trial? We were listening to some Fox 5 New York coverage earlier. They had an attorney on their show that said 90% of these cases are often settled before they go to trial. Wondering your thoughts on that.
I think that that's true, that most cases don't go to trial, but nothing about this defendant is usual. Nothing about this case is usual. People keep using the word unprecedented, and that's true. So in a way, if it's unprecedented, it's hard to look to the percentages of other cases that have come before it to try to hypothesize. I think it is pretty unlikely that Trump is going to plead guilty to this crime, but you never know. And so it certainly could happen. But I think if I were a prosecutor on this case, I would be bringing a case that I was going to be fully expecting to be trying in front of a jury.
And as an attorney, we've never seen any charges against a former president. Do you think this opens the door for the same thing to happen in the future? Will candidates start trying to dig up dirt on each other in the hopes that it prompts an investigation or even charges?
Well, I don't think it's anything new that candidates do opposition research on each other. I think that this might make it easier psychologically for other prosecutors around the country, whether it's the Georgia prosecutors or the special counsel, to bring further charges against him. But I don't think that it's likely to affect future political campaigns more than it already has. I mean, the level of opposition research already is pretty intense. And so I think that what we're likely to see is that this is a case that's going to be confined to this courtroom. And Judge Merchan, who's presiding over the case, is no-nonsense judge. He may impose a gag order to try to stop the parties from litigating the case outside of the courthouse. We widely expect that to be the case. But I think this is something that we're just gonna have to wait to see how it unfolds, because it's so unusual to have a case against a former president. It's never happened before. So we really there are a lot of unknowns here.
And it is certainly going to be interesting to see where it all goes, and we're all kind of in it together trying to see what does happen. As you've said, unprecedented, kind of the key word. I've said it more times than I prefer. I've heard it quite a bit, but it's true. This has never happened before, so we're going to be learning quite a bit as this plays out. But I want to ask you, that's all the questions I had for you. Is there anything I missed or anything you want to add before we let you go?
Yeah, I think that he's in his last few hours until 2:15 right now of handling this the way he wants to handle it. Once he gets in the courtroom and is arraigned on these charges, the judge is really in charge. And I think he's going to need to quickly understand that this judge is not messing around, and we don't mess around in New York with this kind of thing. This is something that happens day in and day out to hundreds of thousands of criminal defendants. And while he's obviously in the public eye, there's nothing special about him being treated with any advantage here that any other criminal defendant doesn't get. So I think he's going to quickly find out that he's going to get a fair shake at things in a New York courtroom, but he's going to need to play by the rules of this judge.
Absolutely. And does he play by the rules? Does a gag order happen? Does he adhere to that? So many questions still lingering as we wait for the former president to make his way to that arraignment later today. Duncan Levin, attorney at Levin & Associates, also spending some time as a senior staffer there in the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. Duncan, thank you so much for joining us. We do appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Take care.